Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Gail Carson. Welcome to Living Regret Free, a program that shows you how to live a better and more joyful life. As an added bonus, I invite you to listen to an introduction to my Mindset Matters program, which ties into this so well. Go to www.sobmindset.com. It's free, and I know you will enjoy it. If you'd like to contact me personally, drop me a line at gailcarson13@gmail.com or go to my website, www.spunkyoldbroad.com, and sign up for my weekly newsletter. Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Gail, SOB, Spunky Old Broad, and I am with you to have another great Living Regret-Free show. Jane Finkle is my guest, and she is a career coach, a speaker, an author with over 25 years of experience helping clients with career assessments and workplace adjustment. She served as Associate Director of Career Services at the University of Pennsylvania, where she created and led the Wharton Career Discovery Seminar, and served as a liaison to recruiters from major corporations. Her newest book is The Introverts Complete Career Guide. Wow, Jane, welcome. I'm as extroverted as you can get, so this would be a really interesting read for me. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. It's nice to be here.
And so what is your definition of introversion and the misconceptions about it?
Yeah, well, I think that's a really important question. So, and also talk a little bit about extroversion, because I think it's important to compare. But really, extroversion and introversion is not really that much about social skills, because I think we think of extroverts as social butterflies and introverts as wallflowers. And I guess in the extreme, it can be like that, but it's really not about social skills as much as our energy. So extroverts are more energized when there's lots of opportunity to interact externally with people and activity. While introverts actually like people and activity, but they need more time to be alone because they get a lot of energy from reflection and introspection. So it's just a difference in where our energy tends to be directed.
Well, that is true because I am very energetic. And so, and I just go in, I don't even think when I go into a place that they won't like me or they don't want me or anything. I just kind of barge in. But I'm really nice about it. It's just that it just didn't occur to me that I wouldn't be accepted. So what are the biggest challenges that introverts face then, especially in today's world of work where I guess they're liking the fact that they're isolated because, they don't have to deal with as many people. But then again, they're probably on more Zoom meetings today than they ever thought they would be.
Right. And actually, that's just as exhausting as, being around a lot of people all day. The thing about introverts is that they do like people and they do like groups. But, the way you were describing yourself, that's very quintessential extroverts because they think and talk at the same time. And so it allows them, I think, to be a little bit more spontaneous, where introverts tend to think things through very carefully, not every second, but before they speak up, especially about important things. And the reason this is so challenging for introverts in the workplace is because the American culture is highly extroverted. If you watch ads on TV, people riding bicycles together, eating together, you don't see a lot of ads where people are just sitting by themselves. So, and I think even compared to some of the European cultures, Americans, tend to be highly extroverted as a culture. So when I worked at the University of Pennsylvania, I also worked with international students, and they always took them time to acclimate to our culture. They thought we were very loud and aggressive.
That's true. They still do.
So I think that introverts feel like they're at a disadvantage because in the workplace, we're rewarded for speaking up and taking initiative. And I think that introverts will do that when it's really important for them. but it's challenging because it's working a little against their nature. But on the positive side, we're all seeking balance. And so introverts, because they're forced to be more extroverted, in a way are a little bit more balanced in the workplace because they have to shift back and forth. But the other thing I think that's important to note about introverts is that they have a lot to offer, despite working against this tide towards extroversion. So they listen really carefully and they're keen observers. So there's something maybe valuable at times to think things through before you do speak up. And I always say that just because people are talking a lot, it doesn't mean they always have good ideas. So I think there's some value in just, taking some time to think things through. And they also have, Bill Gates talks about this. He is a very open about being an introvert. And he talks about introverts have this ability to dig deep and concentrate. So if you need to solve a really important issue or problem and you give them some time, they often will come up with innovative or maybe solutions to important problems. And then I think the last thing they bring is a sensitivity. And not to say extroverts aren't sensitive, but I think because introverts have had this experience of feeling left out, if they don't speak up, and maybe because they tend to think so much, they overthink things. But I have to say, we could use a lot more compassion in the workplace. So I
agree with you there. I mean, there's no question, Jane, that and there's a lot of tension now because of what's going on, and people are very insecure about their jobs and is it going to be there tomorrow? And we really don't know, But how can introverts communicate and build a good relationship with a boss when they're starting anew? And even if they've been in the company and they're switching, departments or positions, they're getting a new boss and they may not be familiar with that person. And, they're not as likely to strike up a conversation as an extrovert. So what do they do?
Well, I think that's a really important concept for introverts because they do sometimes shy away or they wait for people to come to them sometimes. So I think the most important thing for introverts is in their head to start taking initiative right away. So if you have a boss, don't wait for the boss to come in and tell you what to do. Obviously don't bother your boss when they're busy, but set up time right away to meet with the boss and find out what's the best way to communicate when there's a problem. Especially if you're with an extroverted boss, they'd rather talk it out than you send them lengthy emails. Because often introverts like to write everything out. That helps them kind of process their thoughts, but that doesn't work, especially when there are important issues at work. So, knowing right away how the boss prefers to communicate, then to find out what are some of the boss's priorities right now, and are there ways that you can take something off their plate, and what are their expectations for you in the first maybe 2 months or so. One of the things that introverts are really good at because of that, they don't like to disclose too much about themselves right away, is they know how to draw people out and they ask really good questions. So I think, if you're going to meet with your boss, plan in advance because introverts do that really well and have a list of questions. But I think right away kind of establish the best way to communicate with your boss. And also, I think sometimes introverts can be kind of very intense and serious. So I think if you can find something that you have in common, maybe you both play tennis, maybe you both have children, and that invite a little small talk, so, and then every time to be able to follow up, how is your tennis game? How are your children doing? I think that also helps to build rapport and relax the situation. But I do think introverts really have to remember to right away take some initiative. And it's not just with the boss, it's also with coworkers.
So do you think this is a way that they can maintain balance if this culture is very extroverted? I mean, I can see in IT situations or data-driven types of things where introverts are probably the most valued people.
Right.
But when you get into marketing or sales or, places where you really need to be out there, it's a little more difficult. So how do they maintain balance?
Well, I think that, first of all, a lot of them are working at home. So that is, I think that introverts probably adjusted to that a little faster than extroverts.
And they probably are so happy that they're there and they don't want to go back, unless they're also homeschooling 3 or 4 kids at the same time.
Well, and I think the thing that helps introverts is, again, they are very, they like working in teams. They like being around people, but their energy gets depleted quicker. So if they have a day full of meetings, Zoom and phone calls, I mean, that's part of our daily work life, then at night, decompress, sit on your couch and read. Or if you've had evening meetings 2 days in a row, when the third day comes, take some time off. Also, it probably helps extroverts too, but I think physical movement can really balance things. So if they've been sitting in these meetings for like an hour or two, to get up and just walk down the hallway, if they're in their office or even if they're home, just move around. And it helps kind of recharge the energy and brings a little balance. And I also think that outside interests, so after you've been a full day at meetings, at night to take an art class or, listen to your favorite podcast, those are ways to kind of balance that energy. And those are activities often that you can do by yourself. So as long as they can find time after all of that interaction for quiet time, that usually helps them balance all the extroverted energy around them.
Well, there's going to be a lot of job changes and shifts in the next many months as people are still trying to figure out what they're going to do, because as I've been saying to everybody and on all my shows, there is no new normal, there's just new. And we aren't going back to where we were in anything. And everybody's going to have to figure out how they're going to manage, because the next 7 or 8 months are going to be just as bad as the last 7 or 8 months. So how can an introvert prepare for tough interview questions on the one hand, when they're highlighting, how great they are, but also their personal qualities, which they may not want to share. So, what really makes them tick, they don't necessarily want to share that. So what do they do?
Well, they probably don't have a choice, but I think that it's all about, I think interviews actually can work very well to an introvert's strength as long as they prepare. So anytime an introvert has advanced time to think things through, they can often come up with very insightful things or answers to questions to an interview. But they do have to spend, I think, maybe more time than extroverts in preparing. So often, when I work with clients, they come in and say, how should I answer this question? What's the best way to respond to weaknesses? And usually I say, just forget that for now. Let's review more of who you are. So we focus, and this works really well for introverts, we focus on what are signature accomplishments, 2 or 3 accomplishments. What are some problems that you've had on the job and how did you resolve them? If you had a group of colleagues in this room and I asked them to describe you, what would they say? Think of 5 adjectives. Give me an example of a time that you failed at something. So we go through the positives and the negatives, and they're already drawing up examples. And these examples can be used in a number of ways that questions are posed, because you're really taking a look at the big picture. So the fact that they don't necessarily like to talk about themselves, as long as they have some time to prepare and think it through, they'll be fine. And I think sometimes what happens with introverts in an interview is they do answer the question, but they don't expand. So if they think about, it's not just thinking about the examples, it's having a story in your head. So to be able to talk about an accomplishment, being able to explain what was involved with it and what the results were and why you were so proud of it, to give a whole story about some of those answers, will really strengthen the interview. And I think
if I'm not an extrovert, Jane, if I'm not an extrovert, if I am an extrovert, right, interviewing them, I may not have as many good questions as you do. You are an expert at this. Well, but here I am, I'm an extrovert, let's say, and I want to dig right into you. I want to say, hey, Jane, how are you? And how has your day been going? And tell me something that's exciting that has happened to you today. And, an introvert might go, because you're a good interviewer, but a lot of extroverts are not necessarily good interviewers.
Well, I would say that as much as I would work on preparing for, how to answer questions, fully, I also talk to them about small talk, because introverts can do it. They don't like it. They'd rather dig deep. Let's get to the bottom of this. So when you ask them more big picture questions, they tend to like that. But they do need to, talk about the weather. It sort of breaks the ice. So often I talk with them about even examples of hobbies or interests. Sometimes that does a nice way to introduce themselves. But I think they just have to be prepared for those questions, like, what did you do that was so exciting today?
It's I can see where it would be tough. Now, let's talk about social media. We haven't talked about that at all.
Yeah.
And you say that introverts are often wary of using social media. I have to tell you, I am on social media. I use social media, but I don't use it well. To me, it's a big distraction, but it's something I know I need to do. Right. So they want to retain their privacy, and they may go to LinkedIn, which is a business site, right, more than anything else, although that's shifting a little bit too. But they don't like using all of it. So what do they need to do about that?
Okay, so I tell introverts that social media is a gift to them. So they can sit quietly behind a computer and promote themselves without having to be in front of a large group. So once they get over, I think they're also, like everyone, we're worried about confidentiality. But I do think that LinkedIn is maybe the safest of the other, compared to Facebook, because it's entirely professional. So I think in terms of their career, they really don't have a choice. They really need to be at least somewhat active on it. In fact, I went to a conference a few years ago where somebody from LinkedIn, a senior leader, talked about LinkedIn in terms of careers. And he said, well, if you're not on LinkedIn, you don't exist. I mean, that's a little arrogant. It's like, it took a deep breath, but on some level, I think in terms of your career, there's some truth to it. But as I said before, it's a great way for introverts to describe, their career, the history of their career. Also, it's a great way to promote, who they are. I mean, if they have a business, there are ways that you can, maybe you've written an article, maybe there's a video, or even just posting articles that other people in your field would be interested in, and they respond to it. And if you're an expert in a certain industry or field, to be able to blog, these are all ways that you can get attention and also be marketing yourself. And again, you can do that if you're introverted, just sitting quietly behind your desk in front of the monitor. So I think social media is very important, especially for younger people as they're building their professional careers. But again, for introverts, it can really, it's a distraction, but it's a good way for them to promote themselves. And I think the final thing, and this is probably both for extroverts and introverts, I think the power of LinkedIn is the networking, because we all know that networking is the fuel that powers everything. So also it's easy for introverts to reach out.
Well, I have to say that, there's of course, pros and cons, and you've done, you had this whole webinar, this career discovery webinar in Wharton. What has changed since you've left there?
I think when I was there, especially at Wharton, it's a business school, they were all attracted to either investment banking or management, very narrow scope and ideas of where the jobs were, what kinds of jobs were suited for them. And I think that that it doesn't pay anymore to focus on position titles. That has more to do with how you add value now. You have to convince employers that you can contribute. And often that's reflected in resumes. So it used to be a resume was just like a paragraph about what you do. And now if you don't have a list of accomplishments, you look like you haven't advanced much in your career. So, there's this competition, and employers are looking for who they think are the high performers. So you really have to work hard to convince them in terms of your LinkedIn profile and your resume that you've got a successful work history. But I think also in thinking about careers, because people will come to me and say, I'm not sure if I want to do this area or that area. And I think they have to just narrow it to one area, as long as it fits your experience. So I think we need to be more open-minded and stop worrying about the position. Think about the functions you've played and how that would fit in to a certain job or a certain field.
Well, let's talk about, we've got about 2 minutes left. Your book, The Internet's Introverts, Complete Career Guide. Where can they find it, first of all?
Yeah, well, it's being sold on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and the Indie Bound, which is the independent bookstore. Also, there's lots of information on my website, and that's easy. It's janefinkle.com.
But Finkle is Finkle, correct?
Yes, thank you.
Not E-L. It's L-E. Jane Finkle, Finkle.com. The other thing I want to mention is, I don't know if you have a free gift for anybody, but certainly you're welcome to offer it. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if you could give one piece of advice to an introvert who's listening to this and saying, oh my God, I got to go for this job interview, and I don't know. If there's just one thing that we haven't said, what would you say it would be?
I always tell introverts to embrace their introversion and mix it in with extroversion. And then the other thing, and this is like a motto for life anyway, is feel the fear and do it anyway. You're just going to have to go beyond your comfort zone if you want to succeed in the extroverted work world. And
that really is the key to an extrovert. They usually always go the extra mile because they just don't take, that's one of my traits. I don't take no for an answer. Mm-hmm. So, I just keep pushing and pushing and pushing until, but I do it nicely. I mean, I'm not obnoxious about it.
And sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I also want to say there are many successful introverts, and you might be surprised. A
Well,
lot.
I think you're leading your three, four, five most wealthy people in the United States are introverts.
Mhm.
I mean, because they've got the patience. What an extrovert needs to do is create the company, and then they need to have the introvert run it. That's really
Well,
what they
I
need
think
to
that's a
do.
good idea.
So, because the extroverts, they always have something better coming along, and the introverts are there to make sure it happens. Jane, this has been fascinating. I thank you so much for being with us today. And hopefully, all those introverts out there who are listening to this, they're now inspired to go out and do what they were meant to do.
Well, I hope so. Thank you very much. My pleasure.
Oh, you're welcome.
Hi, this is Dr. Gail, and I wanted you to know I have a whole bunch of other things to offer you. If you go to spunkyoldbroad.com, you will see an array of SOB stuff for sale and all our latest products and additions. If you're interested in getting on TV, I have a brand new course, Get on TV. And if you want to start your own business, you'll want my SOB Guide to Business Success. I know you'll love them all. I guarantee it.